Are you a Flurry Rogue struggling to do damage? Well, in this video, you are going to learn the true power of the Flurry Rogue. Do I need to say more? Everything is stunned. 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 Everything is frozen. Everything is stunned. I'm going to show you my build, the skills, the aspects, the items, and the Malignant hearts that we can find in Season 1. So let's get going. So let's go over the skill points. Start off with basic skills. We got 1 point into puncture. This allows us to throw daggers from range. This isn't our main source of damage, so there's only 1 point in this skill, but we mainly use it for the upgrades to fundamental puncture, which allows us to throw 3 blades, and if we hit with 2 or more, we instantly make that target vulnerable. Very good for bosses or just, elite encounters, just guaranteeing that you're making something vulnerable. Next up is core skills. This is a Flurry Rogue. If you haven't figured this out by now, I've picked Flurry, okay? We got 6 points into Flurry, 5 are from spending, 1 is from gear. Get as many points into Flurry as you can. If you're doing a Flurry Rogue, that's just given, you get more damage. We got the enhanced Flurry for increased healing, so this helps a lot as a rogue, especially being up in their face. We get a bit of healing back. I've picked improved Flurry. If Flurry hits a vulnerable enemy, it makes all other enemies hit vulnerable, so this pairs great with the fundamental puncture upgrade. So we guarantee make someone vulnerable, the elite, the boss, we Flurry, everything else becomes vulnerable. Next, the agility skills. So I picked Shadow Step. It's a blink teleport, really good for getting up to the main target, the boss, the elite. And I've picked Methodical Shadow Step. Enemies damaged by Shadow Step are stunned. Great, we stunned the highest priority target in the room. In this build, I'm also abusing a lot of stun damage, so you're gonna see a lot of stun. It's gonna keep coming up. For passives in this section, I've got Weapon Mastery. It's just damage. Basically, if you're using swords, you get 9% increased damage. If you're using daggers, you get increased damage to healthy enemies. I think for Season 1, both are good because they kind of nerfed crit damage, which is a base trait on all swords. So maybe healthy damage is gonna be good with poison, which I'm using in this, but either way, this passive's great for damage. Next are the subterfuge skills. I've got 1 point in concealment. This is great if I'm getting stunned or any form of hard CC. Turning invisible and becoming unstoppable gets me right out of it. Also, the movement speed is great for just running through dungeons really quickly, so you can just ignore trash mobs, just run straight through them. Very, very handy skill. It gives you energy when you enter it too, so in those pinches where you're in a boss fight and you're like, all right, I'm damaging him and I'm out of mana and they're still not dead, you can turn invisible, get some mana back, come out of it with a guaranteed critical hit thanks to countering stealth. Also in this tree, we've got Exploit and Malice, 3 points into each. This is going to give us, once again, increased damage to healthy and injured. Also 9% increased damage to vulnerable. Basically, everything's going to be vulnerable and everything will get to that injured window and then everything will just pop in that room. Next, imbuement skills. Now, this is where this build shines. I like the form of Flurry that is very heavily focused into imbuement skills. Cold imbuement. I've got 5 points spent in the tree, 2 points from items. Cold imbuement allows my next 2 flurries to proc chill on the enemy, 40% per hit. Because Flurry hits 4 times in one cast, I instantly freeze enemies in a single flurry. This is great for freezing a whole pack of enemies so they can't do anything against you because they're frozen. Cold imbuement also has on lucky hit, 40% chance to make enemies vulnerable for 3 seconds. So this is great for just the consistency of spreading vulnerable to all the enemies in the room. And with the mixed cold imbuement upgrade, cold imbued skills deal 20% increased damage to crowd controlled enemies. Everything's going to be stunned in this build. Spoiler. Double this against frozen enemies. So because we instantly freeze on the first cast of Flurry, the second cold imbued Flurry does so much more damage. It's crazy. With the frigid finesse passive as well, you deal 15% increased damage to chilled enemies. This bonus increases to 30% against frozen enemies. Did I forget to mention that everything's going to be frozen? So much damage off just the cold imbued. which leads us to the next imbuement, poison. This allows our next 2 flurries to proc poison or poisoning on the enemy. Poisoning does a lot of damage. With the blended poison imbuement, critical strikes with poison imbued skills deal 75% increased poisoning damage. So because we're critting a lot, especially with this passive precision imbuement, imbued skills gain plus 9% increased critical strike chance. Our crits just mean we do more poison damage, so that's very handy. With the poisoning passives, you want all of these, 3 points in all of them. Deadly venom, you deal 9% increased poisoning damage. Debilitating toxins, poisoned enemies deal 15% less damage. Great for survivability. Plus 3% increased attack speed for each enemy you've poisoned, up to 15%. Attack speed works great in this build because it gives us enough time to have the enemy frozen, deal increased damage to frozen enemies with our poison imbuement, which makes the poison procs massive. Honestly, it's crazy how much damage the poison does. Just to make it clear, if you're doing a imbuement flurry rogue, you want as many points into the imbuments as you can. Up next, ultimate skills. I don't have any, ignore it. Honestly, like, you could pick up Shadow Clone. I messed with a lot of Shadow Clone in the preseason. I think just going for more imbuments is just better. More imbuments, more maneuverability, even Dark Shroud up until super late game is great. The ultimates, I don't really feel work the best. Unless you're playing some sort of like trap flurry, death trap might be a thing. For the flurry rogue, ultimately, there's nothing in the ultimates that I want. Last, key passives. This might be controversial for a flurry rogue, okay? Either flurry or twisting blades. I see a lot of people doing momentum, and it does make sense. You get increased damage reduction, you get increased energy regeneration, you get increased movement speed. All those things are great, and momentum is very easy to keep up. But the attack speed bonus you get from close quarters combat, paired with the 30% increased damage against crowd controlled enemies, it's insane. Everything is going to be stunned. Once we get into the items, the amount of damage to stunned, the amount of stun procs that we can do. For the items, we're going to go top to bottom. We're going to leave the jewelry last because of the new Malignant hearts. We can talk about all of that together. Up first, on the helmet, I've got the aspect of the protector. Damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier absorbing damage for 10 seconds. This effect can only happen once every 30 seconds. I have 720 damage absorption on this. This number can change. The more you upgrade, the higher level you get. But for now, this is great for boss fights, elite fights, just very handy. For secondary stats, you ideally want only 2 of your imbuements and 1 stat of something else. But on helmets, you're looking for imbuement increases. For the chest piece, I haven't got a legendary aspect because I haven't found one with the right secondary stats that I'm looking for. Ideally, you want all damage reduction because this is what rolls a lot of damage reduction stats. So like, you don't want damage, like, it's helpful. Look, cutthroat skill damage is helpful. Damage is helpful. Intelligence can be helpful. But I want damage reduction from close enemies. Ideally, you would want the aspect of disobedience. With this aspect, you gain increased armor for 4 seconds when you deal any form of damage. So this is great because we're just constantly attacking. So we've always got like the max upkeep of armor on this aspect. But ideally, I would have this on the chest piece and I would have something else on this, but we'll get into that when we talk about the jewelry. For gloves, I've got the aspect of surprise. This is one of our stun aspects, which really helps to proc a lot of stuns, keeping the enemies pretty much useless and increasing our damage to them because they're CC. When I evade or shadow step, I leave behind exploding cluster grenades that stun for half a second. The stun is not long, but with this much attack speed, we are always attacking to get benefit from the increased damage. For secondary stats, the main one is increased to flurry. It's your main source of damage. So if you can get increased ranks of flurry, great. On the pants, I've got the aspect of might. Basic skills grant 20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. This is great because we're always basic attacking. I didn't mention this, but we'll go into it. Our specialization is combo points. Your basic skills now generate combo points. Core skills consume combo points for additional effects. So to maximize our combo points, we want to attack 3 times with our basic attack and then pop a flurry. This damage reduction is just always up because at least once every 5 seconds, I'm attacking multiple times with a basic skill. So really really useful damage reduction tool for a rogue. We don't have many. For secondary stats, like the chest piece, you kind of want to go for damage reduction sort of stuff, or things that just sort of make you a little bit more tanky. I got damage reduction, I've got dodge chance, I've got strength. For the boots, I've got the aspect of noxious ice. Now, this is where the cold poison version of Flurry Rogue really shines. Chilled enemies poisoned by poison imbuement will be further chilled for 20% per second. This part doesn't really matter because we instantly freeze most of the enemies anyway. The main part, you deal 28% additional poison damage to frozen enemies. So not poisoning. Poisoning is the damage ticks, but poison damage. So the attack we do with the flurry itself on a frozen enemy is increased by 28%. Things are starting to add up here. We are getting a lot of separate X damage multipliers for when enemies are either frozen, stunned, or under some sort of crowd control. These things start to stack up, especially if you have enough attack speed to freeze the room and then poison the whole room before they become unfrozen. Oh, the damage. For secondary stats, getting plus ranks in Shadow Step is fine. Like, obviously I'm using it, but it just increases the damage, which isn't the main use, so that's not needed. Movement speed is a must. Dodge chance is a must. Also, I don't know how many people care about this with boots, but I really wish these boots had increased evade charges, because I hate having one dodge. One dodge sucks, especially with these stun grenades that can trigger off evades. If I had like 2 or 3, the amount of stun grenades that would be everywhere, there's already a lot everywhere, but would be way more. I just want stun grenades everywhere, okay? I don't want the enemies to move. If they're gonna chain CC me, I'm gonna chain CC them. Get extra dodge charges. For the two-handed weapon, I've got the aspect of encircling blades. If you could ignore anything else I've said in this video, don't ignore this. You need this aspect if you're playing Flurry Rogue, okay? It increases the damage of Flurry, and it makes the Flurry go from attacking in a cone in front of you to all around you, 360 degrees. You're hitting everybody in this damn room, okay? You need this aspect. Putting it on the two-handed weapon just doubles the damage of this aspect, so find a max roll, get as much damage out of this as you can. 30% is great, but even 16, okay, you need this aspect equipped all the time. For secondary stats, we go with a crossbow for the vulnerable damage. Look, bows are the only other option, so they have much more of a percentage, but to distant enemies, which we don't do. So we have to use a crossbow for a Flurry Rogue for the vulnerable damage increase. You're looking for any sort of damage increase that works for the synergies of this build. The synergies are stunned enemies, poisoned enemies, frozen enemies, CC'd enemies, and also don't forget about vulnerable damage, crit chance, crit damage. I don't know what the best ones are yet, but overpowered damage is definitely not one of them. For our weapons, eventually, if you can find the unique condemnation that increases core damage and combo points, great. I want to experiment with that. So daggers or swords should be fine. Swords will be increased crit damage. Daggers will be increased damage to close enemies. So both will be fine, but damage to close enemies is going to have the higher percentage this season because crit damage got nerfed. So for our one-handed weapons, I've got the aspect of Bone Blade. Critical strikes with core skills increase your attack speed by 23% for 5 seconds. This, once again, increased attack speed means we can increase our flurry attacks, which increases all of our things, healing, damage, being able to proc poison when they're frozen, everything. If you have too much attack speed, because it can be a lot, and I don't think it's all needed, I just really like leaning into it. You could probably switch this with like damage while having a barrier. That's better for boss fights and elite fights, like more single target stuff. But I feel like this is just more consistent overall. And for the other one, I've got the aspect of pestilent points. This is a new seasonal aspect. Every third cast of puncture is poison imbued with 150% of normal potency. This is good. Look, it's working. For Imbuement Rogue, it fits the theme and everything. And I feel like they're just trying to make basic skills more beneficial, and it's working. Look, it does things. It stacks poison more. I think when I unlock more aspects in the next world tier, this may change, but look, you get it given to you. You might as well use it. It's very good, especially with all the increased damage to poison and blah, blah, blah. So give it a go. You get it for free this season. You also get this stun one for free this season. So that's why I'm going stun heavy with this Flurry Rogue. Secondary stats for one-handed weapons are pretty much the same for the two-handed weapons. You're looking for anything that increases damage to situations that you are in. So just skip back to when I was talking about two-handed weapons. Now onto the jewelry. This part's going to take a little bit longer. It's got the new Malignant hearts for season 1 integrated into it. So we'll go through it all now. For the amulet, like I said earlier, this aspect I would put on the chest, and in this spot I would actually use the aspect of corruption on the amulet. Your imbuement skill effects have 20% increased potency against vulnerable enemies. On an amulet, this is going to be increased by 50%. So we're going to get 30% increased potency to vulnerable, and everything's going to be in a vulnerable state. So this on the amulet, very good. For the secondary stat, this is going to be up in the air. There's a lot of useful amulet stats that you can roll. There's increased skills, there's damage reduction, there's damage increases, like literally anything. Anything that you can get that fits is going to work. This is working for me. If I could change anything, I'd say the crowd control duration. You know, this amulet's been working for me. I got a blue socket in my amulet, and the heart's effect that I've chosen, when I cast concealment, which is my invisibility skill, I leave behind a shadow decoy trap that taunts enemies. The decoy trap will explode after 5.5 seconds, dealing a damage explosion. This, when I first saw it, I'm like, it's just whatever. This, I've changed my mind. This thing is so useful for just running through dungeons, and going invisible is already handy to just move past enemies, but like, you could just move past enemies and then they walk towards your trap and then they take damage. Sometimes you kill them, sometimes you don't. You can also use it in a middle of a fight to like taunt trash enemies like away from the boss, and then come out of your concealment ready to attack away from the pack of enemies. Like, this has so many useful cases that I do recommend giving it a go, and you'll probably fall in love with it just like I did. For the rings, I've got the aspect of retribution. Distant enemies have an 8% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds. If they're going to be distant, all right, they're going to get stunned before I get there. The important part of this aspect, you deal increased damage to stunned enemies. Do I need to say more? Everything is stunned. 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 Everything is frozen. Everything is stunned. For the aspect on the other ring, I haven't really decided the exact aspect I want to use. I'm thinking aspect of the expectant, attacking enemies with basic skills increase the next core skills damage, and it stacks. So if I can get a good roll of this, you cast like 3 of your punctures, which I'm doing anyway, and then just proc a bigger damage flurry. That's useful. You could also do opportunist aspect if you just want more ways to stun the enemy. I don't know. I like it. More things to stun the enemies just seems like they're never going to be able to do damage to you. I didn't need the aspect to complete the capstone dungeon, so this build is definitely strong enough without it, but aspect of the expectant is probably going to be the most increased damage aspect that we can put on, so go for that one. For secondary stats, like the weapons, you want as much increased damage stats as you can, so damage to stunned enemies, damage to close enemies, damage to poisoned enemies, critical strike damage, damage to frozen enemies, vulnerable damage. All of these things are great. For the rings, I've got a red socket on one. I've chosen the heart that gives me the power lucky hit. You have a 20% chance to launch 2 stun grenades that deal damage and stun enemies for half second. Once again, the stun is not long, but with the amount of attack speed that we have and the high lucky hit chance on puncture of 35%, we're throwing 3 daggers, they all hit. We are able to proc these stun grenades quite often, which leans into everything I've discussed about this build up to this point. For the other ring, I've got a black heart in this one. Black hearts can go into any color socket, so very handy. This is the sole reason I think this build is doing way more damage than I thought, because I've been abusing stun, but that's not a new thing. I was doing it last season. I've been abusing frozen. That's not new. I was doing it last season. I didn't use poison though, but this makes poison do so much damage. Let's get into it. Your damage over time effects are increased by 42% for each different crowd control effect on the target. Unstoppable monsters and staggered bosses instead take 124% increased damage from your damaging over time effects. So in short, your damage over time effects deal stacking increased damage for each crowd control effect on enemies. And for bosses, when you stagger them, it just increases your damage flat. This is nuts. The poison procs, which is why I stun everything and I freeze everything. And if they're not frozen, they're chilled. And if they're not any of that, they've been slowed. So there's a lot of damage going on in this. It's crazy. I hope I've been able to help improve your Flurry Rogue, or at least prove to you that Flurry is indeed a great skill for Rogue. And if this video did help you or you enjoyed it, please give it a like and have a great day. If you're looking for more, I'll leave you with, I don't know. Here's the boss fight I did this season against Varshan. All right, here we go. Oh, get out of that. Oh, he's got more coming. I got this. I got this. Easy. Unless I get hit by some like big telegraphed attack by accident. Oh, we got an elite here. Two elites. Oh, the boss went down. I missed it. Alright. Gotta keep attacking him so I can keep stacking poison on my basic attack. Oh, he's got a barrier. He's doing a big move. A lot of corruption all over the place. Alright, let's go invisible. Oh, we got enemies. Melt these guys before they become a problem. Are they healing him? What happened to that guy? Did you miss me, buddy? This is gonna be easy. Couple more stun grenades. Oh, I gotta see how much damage that was back. Did it.